Jam everyone, and welcome to Numbers Therapy episode 50. It is a huge milestone today. We have a guest that matches the part, so it's going to be awesome. Today's episode titled aptly Web3's Falling Knife. Here at Numbers Therapy, we're talking through the macro, operational, financial, technical, trading-based, and other dimensions of Web3 to help us all elevate, while of course having some good laughs along the way. For everyone who's in the live audience, please feel free to drop questions, whether they're intro questions or they're more advanced. We want to make sure that everybody's along for the ride. I'll be sure to weave them in at the appropriate place. And lastly, Numbers Therapy is rated NFA, as in none of what you hear in here is financial advice. So, without further ado, and on to today's guest and episode. With the rise of Web3 has come the first rise of modern community, has come the first rise of fearless leaders and guiders. When we think of influencers in this space looking back from 2023, some percentage of the time we see bad, overshilling, rugging, and other antics that down bad tends to bring out. And then we have stewards of the space, classy, incredible representations of what our space should be, boosting the space and projects they think truly are excellent, and of course, some healthy sharing of choice projects as well, but also trying to elevate the space and the people within to become experts, stewards, builders, and ultimate pie expanders as well. Today's guest is the literal example of that, keeping positive, informative, and outward-facing while we ride out these waves or downs of Web3. I think we're going to find this to be a very interesting conversation today, as his background is yet another example of unique coming into the space, as is the story of how he decided to prudently make impact in the space. Really happy to have this guy as a new friend and colleague. Please, everyone, welcome Zeneca to the stage, everyone. Zeneca, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much. What a wonderful introduction. Very happy to be here. How are you doing?
Doing awesome. Little bit of funny times these days in our beloved Web3 space, but I think it presents a really interesting inflection point to kind of tease this out and think through what's been happening, what's happening right now, where we're at. So really looking forward to this conversation. So let's maybe go top down here and start with some background that not everyone always gets a chance to hear about from you, which is, pre-Web3, where was your background? Where were you spending your time? Where was your energy before Web3 even became a thing?
Yeah, so basically, prior to Web3, I was a professional poker player, and that was like the only thing that I did. So I went from high school in 2005. I started playing in high school, and started playing poker online, making money, and dropped out of college, and basically did that for about 15, 16 years, all the way up to early 2021. When, I got into crypto a little bit in 2017, but like just temporarily. That 2018 bear market came and I left. And then 2021 rolled around, and that's sort of when I fully got into the space, hook, line, and sinker. So, poker to crypto.
Do you miss the juicy party poker days and that background?
I do, actually. Yeah, I remember 2005. Yeah, they were the good old days where you could play a maximum of 4 tables, and you had to have like an account at Empire Poker to play another 4 tables. Definitely the good old days.
Yeah, we have a little bit of a thread in here for that, for whatever it's worth. So we never talked about this before, but I used to play poker professionally. We also have other folks in here as well who play, a few folks at least who played poker professionally. And even those who didn't, of course, there's like a theme that exists somewhere between poker and gaming and that side of things. So it seems like a very consistent, skill set that makes sense considering the space. So now we just have to, I guess the path to getting a bunch more newbies into the space is to bring them into poker first, maybe get their mindset there, and then so Web3 the long road.
Yeah.
How did you wind up crossing paths with Web3? Like, what was your initial foray into the space? I know you said you touched on crypto a little bit, which probably seeded some of the foundation, but let's just say the NFT side of things. How did you cross paths with the NFT side of things? What was the first thing that, if you remember, that you touched there, and how did you kind of make your way in?
Yeah, I can distinctly remember. So one of my best friends, I've known for 15 years, knew him through poker, and who we got into crypto a little bit in 2017 together. Because actually in 2017, he asked me, we chat all the time. He's like, have you ever heard of Ethereum? And I had not. And so like just from there, we started chatting and digging into it. And then in 2021, he asks me, do you know what a hash mark is? And he was referring to hash masks, one of the popular projects back then, but he got it wrong. And that was the very first time I even knew. I said no. And he's like, do you know what an NFT is? And I said no. And then, eventually he tells me, and I think it's a scam, and so, our mutual friends are wasting all this money on it. And then he read this newsletter by Packy McCormick. He's got a great Substack called Not Boring, and he has this one article power to the person or power to the people. It's all about the creator economy and NFTs and collectibles. And told me I should read it, and I read it, and like my mind started to change, and I was like, oh, there's something here. I sense something, and that's sort of what clicked for me. And then I was sort of like starting to fall down the rabbit hole from there.
Well, what is that? What was that fall down that rabbit hole like for you? Did you immediately, start to purchase a little bit and dabble? Did you start to just go aggressively into trading? Like, what was the rabbit hole that you fell down specifically within, the originally hash masks and NFT space in general?
Yeah.
Like, what avenue did you take?
It was, so this is like probably March 2021, and having like been exposed to crypto a bit in 2017, I knew roughly a bit about Bitcoin and Ethereum and things like that, but I didn't really truly understand it. I didn't know like how things worked in a practical sense. And now it was like, oh, there's DeFi, there's NFTs, you can do stuff with your crypto. I just didn't know how to do any of it. So I said I had to learn this stuff, and I think I might still have in one of my notepads, wrote down a list of things. I was like, all right, I need to, what the hell, what even is gas? What is DeFi? What is a layer 2? Like all these terms. And then so I just started researching and like trying to figure out what they were. And then my friend Jamie and I, we wanted, like, in this article, they talk about CryptoPunks, and we're like, we got to get a CryptoPunk. But obviously they were like 15 ETH and $40,000 or whatever, and that was way beyond our means and bankroll at the time. But what you could do is you could buy this Punks ERC20 token. I had no idea what an ERC20 was. I had no idea what Uniswap or SushiSwap was or MetaMask was. But, we had a mutual friend, and I distinctly remember this. We were like, all right, we can buy like 5% of a CryptoPunk effectively by buying this token. And so our friend was like, oh, it's easy. Just, download MetaMask and then go to SushiSwap and find the token pair, and then you just swap. And it was just gibberish to us in another language. Yeah. And so that was when I was like, all right, I got to figure out what all these new things mean. And that's when, like, buying that token for the first time, I had no idea if I did it right. I probably spent way too much gas or failed it was just like that. And then it was, I fell a bit more down the DeFi rabbit hole where I was like trying to, I think there were a few airdrop things going on and trying to make money, and DeFi and like farming was really a cool thing. So I was like, all right, maybe I can make money doing this. But, I had like $1,000 I was trying to put into a pool, and then you pay $100 in gas. It just didn't make any sense. But it was all sort of, cost of doing business, and then bought some NFTs that went to zero, and just learn by trial by fire, basically.
It's funny. There's very limited micro stakes tables that exist when you go into NFTs. At least within the kind of projects that you want to touch. But what's
especially
interesting
those days.
Yeah, especially what's interesting about what you're saying too is that as you describe that onboard experience that you have, which was like, you have to cross chains, like et cetera, like any of those things. And we're looking at, we're not like that far from that now, like a couple of years later. Like we haven't really resolved that problem. And I know we'll get into like problems and foundational issues in a second. It just strikes me as you're saying it, you're describing it, like we all know it's an issue. We all know it's like pretty complex for people to understand. And yet it has not nearly been resolved enough yet. It's like very, very obvious that that's the case. So yeah.
We're getting better, but there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, for sure. So you pushed down the pathway originally of NFTs, fractionalization, learning, DeFi side as well. At what point did that adjust format-wise for you, where you said, I want to, I'm going to put myself out there via Twitter and other places and put more time and attention to building my brand and becoming more of an influencer in the space? How explicit of a decision was that? And what was the thought process that existed at that point?
It was not particularly explicit at all, as I remember it. I remember April 2021, I got into Zedrun, which was this horse racing game on Polygon. It's still around, and but back then it was, if you could mint one of the horses, you could immediately flip it for a 7x or a 10x, but you could race it, and if you got one that was a good racer, you could make money by racing. And I spent like the entire month of April and probably the first part of May, just like I would wake up in the morning, I'd enter my horse into races all day long, and I made like 3 ETH over the course of the month, or 3 or 4 ETH, and like to me that was like a lot of money, and it was like the biggest thing ever, and it is a lot of money for racing a digital horse. And so that's when I was like, I really got hooked. And I think I just started I started my Twitter account in March, and I just started engaging with a few more people in the Zed community. I would pop into Discords and stuff like that. And then I decided to start a newsletter, my Substack. And the reason, I love writing. I've always loved writing. I used to have poker blogs. I used to, always have really wanted to write. And for me to learn about, if I want to learn about something, I learn best if I have to write about it or explain it to someone else. And so I said, let me just start this newsletter. And so then I started writing about things happening in the space. And it was really an actual newsletter where like the news of the space, if there's a rug pull, I would report on it. If there was a project that minted out that day, you break it down. And so it became a source of news for people and for me to stay on top of the space. And that sort of, I think, led to like my Twitter growing a bit. And then I think in like June sometime, I decided to start tweeting out these like spreadsheets of the floor price of projects. Because back then you couldn't find the floor of project. You just couldn't. It was very difficult, basically. Like there was no websites. There was no like NFT nerds. There was no Blur. There was like none of these stat sites. There was no floor app. Even on OpenSea, it was like the marketplace. And they didn't have it on the front page. They didn't have it anywhere, really. You had to go into a collection, manually sort from price low to high, and then just look at what the lowest one listed was, and that was the floor. And so I would take that and put it in a spreadsheet and then tweet that out every day. And that just totally blew up because it saved people time. And every single day I would tweet that out. I did it basically every day for 6 months. And like that plus the bull run just blew everything up. So it wasn't like an intentional thing. It was like, oh, let me just do it. And oh, wow, people like it. Let me just keep doing it.
Yes, I mean, for those people for whom this is maybe a slightly foreign concept, you're like, okay, you're maybe doing it yourself anyway, right? Because you wanted to figure out floor price.
Yeah,
you know,
I was doing it
data.
myself. Yeah.
Yeah. So then the next step has to be like, why would I take the step to like draft up a thread or a comment to be able to push it out externally? And I think in your case, obviously you were just trying to provide value. You thought it might be useful to people. Did you have any seedling of a thought though that people would then latch as a result of it? Like, was it a little bit of the start of the foundation? No, you were just being
not
being
so basically the way it actually happened is I have a group chat with some friends, the ones that sort of got me into the whole space in the first place, and one of them just made it like an offhand, because I was already doing this for myself for a while, an offhand comment about it would be nice to see like the floor prices of projects. It was just something like that, and I was like, hey, I've got this, and I shared it in chat, and then I can't remember where I got the idea to tweet it. Maybe someone suggested it, or I was like, let me just put it out there. And then, yeah, it just, the response was just instantly like way more engagement than I'd ever gotten before. I think, I probably only had like, I don't know if it was hundreds or 1,000 or 2,000 followers or something like that. And then I was like, all right, let me just do it again tomorrow. And then I was like, okay, I'm onto something. Let me just keep doing it. And it wasn't like, there weren't threads to begin with. It was just the floor. And then I started adding to it over and over and over time. And it really became a thing.
That's awesome. It's a great story that it got seeded so organically and kind of like inadvertently and got to that. Very, very, very cool. So, okay. So we find ourselves, July 6th right now, 2023, kind of in the lowest low of a market that's kind of been there, period, since, for a long time at this point, especially as of recent, right? We're having issues with even the dominant players like the Yuga projects and Azuki, right? We've seen all these things. Just for the purpose of like breaking it down, because we have this inflection point to be able to do so. What's kind of the list of problems that you think have existed in this space to this point? Like, why are we here right now? Why are we having the breakdowns from the wide perspective, from the narrow perspective? What's on your mind in terms of what's going on and kind of where we're at?
I think there's a lot of things. At the end of the day, it comes down to supply and demand, and there's way more supply than there is demand, and so prices go down. I think a lot of people bought things with expectations that could not be, like, not that weren't met, but like just literally could not be met by the market or by individual projects. That has led to the collapse. I think, a lot of people thought that they were like buying equity in the company, or like they bought an NFT, and that means that, they get, if the company does well, they do well, which is not necessarily true in the case. I think we're seeing a lot of like the Ponzi-nomics effectively start to collapse, where projects just release additional and additional tokens into their ecosystem and ERC20 tokens, and like, people think, oh, free money, but it's not free money. The money has to come from somewhere, and where is it coming from? As well as just like we're in like the overall attention and excitement for NFTs is at basically all-time lows since they kind of took off in 2021. And there's just no real new money entering the market. The liquidity is not there. And so the people that are still around is like we're trading amongst each other, or there's money being taken out. Now, I think there is a lot of money there's obviously a lot of money in the crypto ecosystem and on the sidelines. And I think there is a price point at which sideline money decides to buy. And so like there is that potential to like bounce and like stabilize at a floor. But the thing is, who knows? Like, have we hit that now? Do we drop another 50, 80, 90%? Is it up from here? Nobody actually knows the answer to that.
Yeah. Impossibly tricky question. I just want to pull one chicken or egg thing apart for you for a second that we don't spend enough time thinking about, but I know it's something that's been on your mind. We briefly talked about it the other day, which is the premise of attracting teams and people into the space, right? And so where this becomes a little bit chicken or eggy, in my opinion, is, there's no investor money coming into the space, and therefore projects are not overly motivated to be able to create because there's not that much money coming into the space. In addition to that, we have the issue that exists with royalties as well, right? That's come from the 0.0% royalty. So a previous revenue stream that people were expecting off the table now, that also tempers building too, right? Because now there's one less revenue stream that exists. However, on the flip side of that, the chicken or egg side, oftentimes if you get a lot of builders just kind of taking a leap of faith with a good ecosystem and a good foundation that exists, in aggregate, you're creating more attention on the space. And then that becomes the kind of what kickstarts and kind of front runs the situation. More attention in aggregate comes on the NFT space, more hype comes on the space, and then money may be attracted to it as well. So thoughts on that? Like, is it chicken or egg? Like, what are your thoughts currently? How do we get this out of a stalemate, maybe is part of the question.
Yeah, I think it's, it is definitely a bit of a chicken or egg where, for instance, let's talk about like the friction to be a participant in the ecosystem, and like we were talking earlier, how difficult it is to get onboarded, and the complexities of the seed phrases and gas and MetaMask and layer 2s and all that kind of stuff. That definitely discourages a lot of like mass adoption. And so how do we fix that? By people in the space building better tools for that. But then how do we attract the people to build those tools? It is a chicken and egg problem. I think the wonderful thing is that we already have, to my mind, more than enough excellent builders in Web3. Like, there are really smart people working on some of these problems. There's really smart people and companies building out amazing IP, like the Yugas. I mean, the Azukis, the Pudgy Penguins, the D-Gods, in the meme lands, there's a lot of great projects building cool IP, Doodles, Cool Cats even. Like, that's cool. So I think what we need more than anything is just time. We just need time for the market to heal, time for the quote-unquote mainstream or rest of the world to sort of get over the fact and not think of NFTs as a scam. And if you can kind of think of it all the way back to like the early days of crypto, where people thought crypto was an entire scam, and crypto went through crazy cycles. And then as longer time goes on and the more a thing exists, the less risky it becomes, and the more people begin to believe, oh, this thing is going to stick around for longer and longer and longer amounts of time. So yeah, we just need time, honestly.
We have this like very strong parallel that I'm sure you'll appreciate with the poker markets as well, right? That as kind of the markets matured and information became more, omnipresent as well, the sophistication of the markets existed, more people started playing, the margins went down over time. So there was a regression, same way that happened with crypto, same way
exactly.
That's going to happen with NFTs as well. So what all that you're saying says to me is like, maybe there's some arbitrage that exists here at the end of the day. If there's somebody who does not really need money now and is willing to invest sweat equity, while everybody else's eye is off the ball right now, this is still going to the same place at the end of the day. So if you can build, even though there's not a lot of cash and funding is a little bit limited, but if you can build incredible on-ramps in a really lean fashion, or whatever your thing, security elements or whatever else it is, you're going to be poised for disproportionate success, because you're going to be 1 to 2 years ahead of everybody who's waiting for funding to come around and waiting for the dollars to flood in the doors. So maybe there's really incredible opportunity that exists now. Do you agree with that? Do you think that's a fair way of thinking of it?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's like asymmetrical bets, and like being early in, like, we still are very early in a market that, if you believe what I imagine we believe, and probably everyone listening believes, that a decade from now, blockchain technology will like underpin the internet, be a layer of this new internet of decentralization into 10, 20, 30 years, 5 years, who knows exactly when, that future will come. And so by betting on it here and now, the upside is phenomenally enormous. And it's like the downside is, what would you otherwise be doing with your time? So there is always that trade-off where, like, all right, you invest all this time and money in crypto. Could you be out there building an app in the AI space? Could you be out there running a restaurant? Could you be out there, whatever else you're doing with your life? You always have to think about it as a trade-off. But to my mind, that if you're really wanting to work hard and build something amazing that will have longevity, that's the other thing. We live in a world where AI is like crushing entire industries and swaths of jobs and job categories. I think blockchain is a pretty safe space to be, planting your flag and be like, this is the area I want to build in for the next 10, 20, 30 years, 5 years even. So yes, definitely as on a builder side, but even as a trader, like it's sort of the asymmetrical bet thing again, where the downside is kind of capped. Let's say you buy Bitcoin, ETH, or whatever thing. Again, not financial advice, but yeah, things can go to zero. That's the absolute floor. But if you don't think, if you have long-term conviction, maybe you get at 50%. But the upside is, again, kind of phenomenal, because if it is adopted in a significant way, then like we have the BlackRock, the Fidelities of the world filing for ETFs, and they manage trillions of funds, and that might unlock a tremendous amount of liquidity. So there is a potential huge upside. Obviously, everything in this space is crazy risky, but yeah, I think it's obviously, I think it's a really exciting space to be in, especially now in the bear market.
Yeah. So speaking of of risk and kind of the leads of Bitcoin, Ethereum, let's focus on, the NFT project side of things and some of the leaders that exist there. And, one category I know you've paid particular attention to, as has a lot of people, is PFP projects, right? How sustainable, in your opinion, do you think PFP projects are? Are they here to stay? And what's more importantly, what's broken with them currently? And I know it's not overall consistent. I know every project has its own dynamic and its own elements that exist, but maybe generalizing what's broken, what do you think's broken with them? And if to the extent you want to break it down for specific examples, that's fine too.
PFPs are here to stay. Like they're not going anywhere. As a category, they're going to be a huge industry in the future. It's just that, to me, that's sort of undeniable. I think what's deniable and up for debate is in what form will that exist? Like everyone can have a PFP, but maybe they're free. Maybe you subscribe $10 a month and you can just pick whatever PFP you want. Like that to me seems like a more reasonable business model. And a lot of these early PFPs, I think the value doesn't come from the fact that they're a PFP per se. It's twofold. It's a membership token to a community, and maybe that community is an exclusive and valuable community, or as a collectible item/status symbol where you've got a rare item from the early days of Web3 that in 10 years from now, there's only 10,000 original Bored Apes, 10,000 CryptoPunks. And if everyone has PFPs and you have one of these, then there's flex, there's art value, there's cultural value, historical value. To me, that's where the value comes from. So PFPs, are going to be fine and they'll be around forever. It's just like which PFP projects here today will be existing in the future and thriving in some capacity. And I think the biggest problem I see for most PFP projects and most projects in general is they don't have an obvious revenue stream. Like where are they, if these are businesses, where is the money coming from? And I think for a lot of the time, the business model was, let's just sell NFTs to our community. And sure, that's great for the company, but then you can't just keep doing that forever. Doesn't do great things for the community. So you have to think about where you're going to generate revenue from that is ideally external to the space or external to your community or supportive of your community. And that's where you see things like Pudgy Penguins doing brilliantly, where they sell toys and merch, and they target the space, but also the Web2 space. And I think they're doing probably the best out of anyone. But then you have the IP companies, they're building games and TV shows and cartoons. And if those take off and generate revenue, then that could be a great thing and sustainable model. But I think the vast majority of projects are struggling with revenue.
Do you think inevitably, even though we don't have the regulatory frameworks and foundation set up, but do you think inevitably we're heading towards a royalty sharing model that exists, whereby by having this, if you're going to be utilizing IP for, like Pudgy Penguins, for instance, whatever, that distributions are naturally going to happen? And you think that's likely where it's going at the end of the day?
I think that'll be one of several models. So I don't think that'll be it but I do think that we will kind of crack that chestnut where we will have figured out legally compliant, ecosystem positive ways for holders of NFTs to reap in the financial rewards of the company in one way or another. But I think we're quite a way off from figuring out how that framework actually works, again, in a legally compliant way. In the US, for instance, you can probably do it in some countries now, but US is such a huge market that I think we need to figure that out.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I mean, given the foundation that you're saying where we're at and the issues that exist, the structural issues, the other revenue source issues, et cetera, something that I also know is on your mind is the premise of the falling knife, which, a lot of people, of course, talk. What are your thoughts there about the current state that exists, and maybe your comments to traders, investors, from your perspective about, are we catching a falling knife now? Had it, or at least had to think about it and had to think about treating it. What are your reactions and thoughts there?
I think 99% of people are losing traders. 95% maybe. 95 to 99% of people are not going to be successful in the long term, day trading, swing trading, trying to time the market effectively. some people get lucky and are doing great for a extended period of time, and maybe they get lucky for the rest of their lives. But I think the vast majority of people don't have like and this is not about intelligence. Like, this actually goes back to poker as well. The vast majority of people do not have the specific set of skills required to succeed, and it's a combination of like emotional temperament and management and regulation, psychology, market psychology, bankroll management, math, statistics. Like there are people way smarter than me that are way worse at poker, and they've tried and they just couldn't do it because maybe they got a little angrier and they didn't have the right temperament or this, that, or the other. Just like there are way people way smarter than me that are, not successful day traders and traders of NFTs or crypto or whatever. So I think, like, again, the vast majority of people should not even attempt to catch a falling knife. The best strategy, and this again goes back to Warren Buffett, which, it's funny to quote him because he hates crypto, but he says the vast majority of people, basically everyone, should just buy an index fund and hold and dollar cost average into that. To me, that's the same thing in crypto. Buy Bitcoin, buy ETH, maybe one or two others, and then, maybe find a couple of projects that you like. And instead of trying to time when you should buy, just buy periodically over an extended period of time if you have that conviction in it. And so, like, that's my philosophy. And if you're trying to catch a falling knife, you should have your own conviction and own strategy. And you shouldn't be listening to me or anyone else about whether it's a good time or a bad time to buy, or whether you just have to come to that conclusion on your own. And if you're not able to come to that conclusion, you probably shouldn't be trying to catch or time the lows or anything. Time in the market is better than timing the market. I forget who said it, but it's a quote that's always stuck in my head.
I had a feeling you were going to go to the poker parallel there, by the way. I had a feeling that was about to happen. You're going to have some degens annoyed with you as well, who want to make sure that they get their Ep.50 as well about it. But I think your points are totally fair, what you're saying. Beyond PFPs, are there other categories of projects that stand out to you that you think are positioned to be, really structurally sound moving forward, even if they're also in a decline right now and not? Are there other categories that stand out that you think are particularly well poised for the future? Anything stand out in your mind?
Art. To me, art is the most simple, best, and just safe, the quote unquote safest use case of NFTs to collect, to hold, to invest in, if that's the thing you're looking for. This comes back to an idea of external dependencies versus internal dependencies. If a project, let's say punks versus Bored Apes. Bored Apes have a roadmap. Punks do not have a roadmap. The value of a punk is not dependent on Yuga Labs doing anything. If Yuga Labs does nothing, punks will be just fine. If anything, they got hurt by being bought by Yuga Labs. They were doing even fine before that, but that's up for debate. Whereas Bored Apes, if Yuga Labs doesn't deliver a great game, a metaverse, continued airdrops, IRL experiences and events and all this kind of stuff, the value will significantly tank. So there's all these dependencies on external factors, execution risk. So if the team doesn't execute well, it's very risky. Art, on the other hand, yeah.
Go ahead, please. Yeah.
I was just going to say, art, on the other hand, there's no roadmap for the most part with art. The value is already there. And so obviously not all art is created equal, and there's a lot of art that will not do well price-wise, and the supply and demand and artists and all that kind of stuff. But finding the right pieces of art from the right collections that, you think will have longevity and cultural value, if you believe in them now, that thesis shouldn't change in the long run. You don't really have to track and follow the team. You can just sort of buy and hold, and that external dependencies versus internal one, to me, is something I think about a lot, and I think that is a big difference between PFPs and art and other projects. One thing I'll say, though, is that it's not necessarily a bad thing to have external dependencies or a roadmap, because if they knock it out of the park, I think that the highs are potentially higher, but I think the risk is probably disproportionately higher.
Yeah. I was literally about to ask you the question before of, is punks art? Like, do we classify punks? Because structurally, yes. I know it's not technically, structurally it's art, right? I mean, structurally, roadmap wise, it functions in the same way. And I think just to build on what you're saying regarding the external dependency comment, right, is, and maybe the way that I frame it is, for each action that any of these projects take, there's multiple scenarios that exist, right? And so there's, like, let's say a 10% scenario that's hideous, like terribly bad, and maybe 20% that's bad, and so on and so. And if you multiply that out across, 10 actions that they're taking, the probability that one of them is going to turn up tails and bad is very, very, very high at the end of the day. And it's going to crash the whole project, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's variance, the variance parallel to poker that exists, right? And smoothing out
Yeah.
variance at the end of the day. And there is no variance for CryptoPunks. There is no variance for art like you're suggesting, other than the macro factors that kind of exist.
Exactly.
At the current state that we're at right now, what is your personal forecast on? I hear some people saying like we're definitely going to have another bull, or maybe the market's efficient and a bull is out of the question at this point, or maybe it'll be a somewhat bull. Or what are your thoughts here? Are we going to have another bull? If you had, yeah, go ahead. Yep.
Sorry,
No
headphones
worries.
knocked out. 1 second. Okay,
Great.
we're back.
So
Hello.
hello, testing.
Hey, sorry, I rolled over my headphones, so they yanked out.
Headphones, everything's rugging in the space, not just projects, but headphones sometimes rug. So I hear some people say another bull definitely happening sometime soon. I hear people saying, I don't know if we're ever going to have another bull, efficient market, that side of things. I hear in between sometimes. What's your personal take on this? Do you think another bull is happening? What's your forecast here?
I feel like there's a very, very, very high likelihood that we're getting another crypto bull run, like Bitcoin and ETH. I think they'll hit new all-time highs. I think ETH to 10K is quite likely at some point in the future. I think Bitcoin to 100K is quite likely at some point in the future. It's just like, does it go way lower before that? Are we talking in 3 years? Are we talking in 10 years? Like these are all questions that I don't know, but I think long-term, there will be another bull run for both Bitcoin and ETH. Within the NFT space, I think it's a much different, trickier proposition. I think we will see certain NFTs, and it might be entire projects or individual ones, appreciate significantly in price over whatever time horizon. But I don't think we'll see sort of a market-wide bull run like we saw before. I just don't think that will ever happen again. There'll probably be another new shiny thing at some point, like we had ICOs, DeFi Summer, we had, NFTs. There will probably be something else at some point in the future that will be a inefficient, like a crazily inefficient market, irrational, and there'll be insane opportunities. I don't know what that is. I don't know if that'll be in the crypto space or somewhere else. I don't know if that comes in a year, 2, 5, 10, ever, but that seems like a likely thing to happen. But NFTs as a whole asset class pumping like we've seen in the past, I don't think we'll ever get that again.
Yeah, but on the bright side, music to our ears, the word inefficient. There's no brighter and more positive word to hear than inefficient markets.
Yeah.
So I totally agree, though. I mean, it's tough to tell exactly where it's going to come from. One of the biggest questions on everyone's mind is bringing the next wave of people, 100K, 1 million, 10 million into the space. And there are a couple ways to go about that, of course, right? D2C, direct to consumer with influencing, but also helping lead and shape the next batch of project creators, much like ZenAcademy does, right? So can you talk about your thought process with ZenAcademy, maybe who the community is and where you see that going? And maybe even background about like when you started that and like what was your thought of like take us through the whole thing. We're really curious to hear about that.
Yeah, so I launched ZenAcademy November 2021. And the idea for it came a few months earlier, and it was actually thinking back. So I've been trading a bunch in the space, and I was also creating content, and I liked the content creation part a lot more than the trading part, and it was a lot less stressful than the trading part, and I wanted to lean more into that. But then I thought, like, if I'm going to be doing this full time, I should figure out some way to like make it some long-term sustainable, business livelihood for me as well, monetization paths, all that kind of stuff. And like the Web2 model of monetizing content is subscriptions, Patreon, all these kind of sponsorships, affiliate links, that kind of stuff. And so I thought, well, we're in the NFT space. Let me just experiment by launching an NFT and building sort of a community out of that will, there was no roadmap. And so I said, well, I don't exactly know where it will go, but I just know that the thing that I like is creating content. And the thing that I think the space needs is better educational content, kind of specifically about onboarding, because of having just gone through the thing 6-8 months earlier. I was like, how difficult it is to onboard. So that was like the high level vision. It was like, all right, let's help to onboard people and be an academy, educational institution, but without a specific roadmap. I didn't know where we were going to go or how it was going to get there. And so that was the launch of ZenAcademy. I launched the 333 Club at the same time. It was like 2 tiers of membership. You can basically think of it, 333 much higher priced, much more exclusive, only 333 members. It was targeted towards more like founders and builders and people who maybe wanted my advice or consulting on the things they were working on. But again, no real roadmap with that either. And basically over the last 18 months has been experimenting and trying different things to see what works and what makes the most sense and what's adding value to the market and then could potentially generate revenue for us as a business. But we did spend a lot of time on onboarding and creating guides and courses, specifically one free email course called 30 Days of NFTs, which people sign up to every day for 30 days. They get just a 2-3 minute piece of content to read, getting them slowly into this NFT space and understanding, just beginning like what is a blockchain and what is Bitcoin and then, what is security and all that kind of stuff. And so that's been great. We've done a lot of onboarding, 10 to I think maybe 15,000 people have signed up to that course now over the last 8 months. And that's been awesome. And I think that what we've done, I'm very proud of. But a few months ago, I sort of came to the realization that when we talk about the next million, 10 million, 100 million, whatever, they will not be onboarded into the space. That is just the wrong mentality. We don't need to onboard people. We need to build a space to which people don't need to be onboarded to. So no one needs to be onboarded to use an iPhone or the internet or a web page or sure, in the 90s people did, but the tech got so good, so user-friendly, so simplistic that it's touch and point and, within 5 minutes of using an iPad for the first time, you get it and you know how it works. And so that is where things that are outside of my domain knowledge will help adoption. That's where the developers will come up with new wallet protocol like ERC-4337, smart wallets and things that will just make it a lot easier for people to set up a wallet and store their assets securely, as well as better user interfaces and experience to make it way more seamless and safe and all that kind of stuff. And that's happening. That's, again, it comes back to needing time. But then it's so what do I do? What does ZenAcademy do if we're not as focused on onboarding? Obviously, we're going to keep running that course and helping those who want to learn about the space. But now it's a bit more of a pivot to create different types of content. And that's kind of where we're at right now. I'm working on a few different courses to teach people maybe less about the absolute big basics and beginnings. And it's more if you want to launch a company, I've been running a company in the space for 18 months. How do you think about what country to set it up in? What about tax? What about legal stuff and IP and all that kind of payroll? There's a lot of, and hiring and there's all these things that I think a lot of people want to know about, but there isn't that much content out there for. And so that's the kind of the direction that I'm now beginning to head in, where I think we can add value in a different way to onboarding, because there's only so much you can do to onboard people. Yeah.
I hear a little bit of the heed the art or heed the punks mentality in your approach of not having a roadmap and knowing that you need to be nimble to some extent, but at least having a directional sense of where things are going. So that's super, super cool. And it's just a really big deal what you're doing. Like what you're doing, especially with the pivots and otherwise, is a more scalable approach to solving what we're all trying to solve, right? Rather than doing kind of the manual onboard approach like you're suggesting. I mean, I totally agree with the mentality, and I'm sure everyone who's listening, agrees with that too, which is, Web3 inevitably is going to get pushed into the back end, right? Cleaner UIs and interfaces is going to become more of a thing. And there may even be no mention of Web3 I've used the analogy before, but much, and this is going to age me again, but much like HDTVs were HDTVs at the time, and all of a sudden it just became TV. That was the expectation that existed, right? And the norm.
Yeah.
And I think it's very, very kind of parallel in this case, but it's incredible what you're doing. I mean, it's a huge deal in a scalable way. Hey, you're helping project creators create, out of which thousands or tens of thousands of users will come in a more scalable way afterwards. So the net impact on the space that you're having by doing something like this it's just a huge deal. And we really appreciate it and appreciate you and what you're doing. So I know as part of this also, you have a PFP, I think, as emerging, or I think something possibly coming out. Can you talk why? Why do we have a PFP emerging here? Is it necessary?
Yeah.
Especially given the fact that PFPs are down, like we talked about earlier. So where are we at here? Why are we doing this?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So when we, again, launched in 2021, I very, very intentionally did not do, everyone was doing a PFP project. And I was like, well, we don't need more PFPs out there. And I'm not an artist myself. And so I would have to find an artist and work with them and all this kind of stuff. And I said, I really just want to build this membership and community. So I will just do an ERC 1155 token. The art quote unquote art is just like a letter thing that I wrote myself. I created it in Canva, and I said, all right, the spirit of it is there, the utility is there. We don't need a PFP. And so why now, 18 months, probably coming up to 2 years later, are we actually doing a PFP? And the reason is that there is like, it's undeniable that there's something special and powerful about having the ability to represent a community on social media with a profile picture. Like that there is, it's powerful. It's instant recognition. It's the ability to know a bit about someone before even talking or engaging with them. It's the ability to find people from your tribe, and there's marketing power, there's community building and strengthening power. Plus it's just like, we get an opportunity to create some beautiful art and deliver that to our holders who've been with us for so long. And so it's with that sort of mindset that we decided to do a PFP. Now, it has taken longer than initially expected. We had to change art direction and artists and all that kind of stuff. And even then it's taking longer. That a lot of learning in the process for me. But now we're like pretty close to the finish line, and I'm really happy with it. And I think that, again, because it's not a paid thing, people who have one of our tokens will just be able to burn and reveal their PFP. It's like a direct one-to-one transfer conversion type thing. We're not extracting liquidity from the market. We're not charging our community anything. And so I think, given where we started from with no roadmap and no expectations, we're going into the PFP, again, similarly with no specific roadmap. I think we have a little more of a direction on where we're going as a business and where our revenue and all that kind of stuff and our focus is. But no real promises of, we're not planning to be an IP brand. We're not planning to build a decentralized anime world or sell toys or anything like that. It's really a PFP to strengthen and enhance our community and give them something to just have fun with, and hopefully grow the community, give some bigger visibility. And we have a little bit of lore sprinkled in, again, for fun reasons. But those are kind of the thoughts that I'm going into the PFP with.
Represent Australia with the Canva usage. Good stuff there. Very, very cool. Play along with me with this question for a second. So I just want to disclaimer again on this, not financial advice on this, but just play along with me on this discussion. Does a utility-based project, like in this example, plus PFP mean higher prices inevitably? Do you think, I'm not suggesting that you think the prices of your project will go up, but I'm asking, generally speaking, is it accretive project? Does adding a PFP to a utility-based project inevitably mean more value in aggregate, right? Some people are going to get the less popular PFP. Some people are going to get more popular PFP rarity, all that kind of good stuff. In aggregate, though, is that a utility element that exists?
I think yes. Yes, it has to, because if you already got the utility and you're adding a PFP that adds marketing and awareness and brand and art and value and collectability, yes, like in an efficient market, this would add value to such a project. I think, I think that, like, to answer the question, yes. I think that sometimes people perceive PFPs and then they ignore the utility because they might categorize a PFP project as, oh, it's a PFP project now. It's not a membership to a community that has utility and perks. So
it's funny. Yeah. It's funny that like everything only gets one label on it, right? Like you only get one label on a project. Either you're a membership project, right, that happens to have a PFP, it happens to have whatever else, or your PFP project that's this, or your art project, even though there may be community benefits. Mm-hmm. Like everything gets pigeonholed into one thing. And in reality, and I think as you called out earlier, everything's almost everything to some extent, right? With the only limitation on that maybe being like the art projects you define, which very intentionally are not trying to build roadmap or anything that can, we're just, right? That's just that. But for all the other ones, almost everything's everything at the end of the day, and all have the components. So super funny.
For sure.
The still line that you said, the other day when you and I talking, and you were alluding to this a little bit earlier too, is one eye on the market right now. You were talking about this a little bit earlier as well. We don't get a lot of time to speak about what that means, though. And especially for you with ZenAcademy as well, you get extra time and attention to think about, like, what does this mean exactly, right? Like what should this mean to our listeners, to anybody else? What do you think is the optimal setup that exists right now? And I understand that there's like nuance and everybody's different and everyone's different, needs for cash now, cash later, can take risk, all those kinds of things. Like generally speaking, like what do you think is the optimal setup that kind of exists right now? And what is one eye on the space? What's the highest leverage use of one eye on the space if you had to distill it?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I guess like just the concept of one eye on the space is that a lot of people keep zero eyes on the space. A lot of people in a bear market, like myself in 2018, they don't like looking at their portfolio value because it's down and keeps going down and it's red, and they get depressed, and then Twitter is toxic. And so they like, you know what, I'm going back to whatever it was they were doing before. They go back to a job, a real life. Maybe they had a job the whole time. They just stopped checking Twitter and floor prices on the weekends and after work. And for some people, that's great and necessary. And like if it's being in the space is causing you like mental anguish and whatnot, that's a great thing to do. But I think it's usually too extreme, and like keeping at least one eye again on the space and like what's happening again, that will allow you to be like, oh, things are taking off. Oh, look, there's a really great way to onboard people. Oh, BlackRock just filed for an ETF, and maybe the tides start turning and I want to start paying attention again. I think that will allow people to more easily and readily, be around when the next bull run does happen. Because you sort of, if you're not in the space, you'll hear about the bull run on the news. And if you're hearing about it on the news, that's usually a top signal. So without keeping an eye on the space, and what that means is different for everyone. It might be subscribe to my newsletter to show my own thing, or subscribe to a newsletter. Overpriced JPEGs has a great one. Bankless has a great one. Like subscribe to something so it just comes straight to your email inbox. Or, if you want to be a little more, you spend half an hour a day on Twitter and just try and catch up with what's going on. But the problem with Twitter is it's very addictive and consuming, and the signal to noise is not great. That's why maybe find a YouTuber that you really like. He's not shilling and is like really giving, like Benjamin Cohen is, I think, a really great one. Spend an hour or two a week just watching videos. And so like, you're like, oh, wow, market is turning around and there's all this positive stuff happening. Maybe it's a good time to start spending more time again in the space. So that's how I think a person, like the highest leverage is like an hour or two a week on probably not Twitter or not Discord, just like a high signal to noise piece of content. And again, there's a lot of great newsletters, there's a lot of great YouTube channels, probably one of those.
I know you have a lot going on your side, but do you still play any poker by any chance? Do you have any time to play a little bit of poker, or what's the latest
Basically,
status?
No. But honestly, I really don't miss it either. Like I did it for 15 years. It was a grind towards the end, and I was like really happily looking for something else. But it is an amazing game. And so like, without any other responsibilities, if I could click my fingers and be in Vegas for the World Series right now, I would love to play. Like it would be really fun to do it, especially now that I'll be playing as a amateur, a recreational player, and not this is my job and livelihood. I could probably take it a little less seriously, have a bit more fun. But we have like a poker nights in ZenAcademy twice a week. I rarely get to play, but I'm hoping to play this weekend in those. Like that's about the extent of it now.
Let's go full circle though, if you allow me to, for a second, and come back to poker for a second, because I think there's another parallel that exists here, which is the concept of meta was, of course, not just a thing within Web3. It existed within poker too, right? And the analogy that I feel like exists here that I'm sure you've experienced was like, if you leave the poker game for like a year, a couple of years, something like that, there are these trends that emerge. But the trends that emerge aren't step functiony, right? They're kind of linear and smooth that winds up existing. So there's evolution that exists as to like, how do we even get to the point that we got to? So an example of this might be like the concept and the premise recently of like down betting, for instance, right? Which if you remember in 2010s or early 2000s, like that didn't exist, right? There wasn't even a thing that existed at all, right? Down betting, for those who are like unfamiliar with poker, is just like a more efficient way to be able to bet, to get the action and achieve what you're trying to achieve in simple terms, right? I think that's like the simple way to achieve it, just a better, more optimal way to play. But point is there was meta. There was a trend that existed to be able to get there. And so I think the parallel that maybe kind of exists in poker to some extent is if you just woke up one day, 2 or 3 years afterwards, and you hadn't played it all, and all of a sudden people are doing this, you wouldn't have the context to be able to figure out why it's actually happening. And therefore, you wouldn't be able to read between the lines to figure out what the trends are. And I feel like that's quite parallel to what you're describing in Web3, where if you just woke up in like a year and you went to sleep and, all of a sudden the market existed, and it would be really hard to ramp up really fast and get the context to trade or invest effectively or do whatever you want to do.
Exactly.
Do you agree with that? Am I stretching here on the parallel?
No, I think that's 100% accurate. And like, I mean, again, if I went to play poker now, I would be so far behind the curve because I haven't really paid attention for 2 and a bit years now. And even the last couple of years, I was half checked out as it was. It's exactly the same. And like, I would say it's even worse in crypto because poker, for the most part, like the rules are the same, and the elements that are basically exactly the same, the psychology, and then certain parts, like 80% of the 90% of the game is the same. It isn't the devil in the details that separate the great players. But in crypto, it's a completely different world. Like 5 years ago versus now, it's totally different. It's just who knows where we're gonna be 5 years from now. So yeah, it's the same concept. It's a great analogy. It's even exacerbated, I think, in Web3.
Yeah, and maybe to build on that as well, right? Something that I'm sure you experienced that, you're probably referencing a little bit here in the subtext is, the markets became significantly more efficient within poker over time, right? So therefore the margins became tighter, right? Why did the margins become tighter? Because the rise of internet and data at the end of the day, predominantly speaking, not just like tools like solvers and things like that can help people crunch, which, oh yeah, by the way, solver is very, very akin to pick your favorite tool right now in the Web3 space, right? Similar concept that exists, giving you the optimal strategies or data that you need to make decisions. But also like the dissemination of information became everywhere. People were able to read the same blogs and get information, whereas previously that didn't exist. So if you can imagine like rewinding your time back, none of us are old enough, but to 1970 or something, nobody was able to share information, and you just had like your own theories and thoughts and studying to be a really good poker player. And therefore it was a very inconsistent and inefficient market in a really, really nice way, right? So when I look at like a Web3 market like this, based on what you're saying, I think there's that much, considering technology and everything, there's like that much more of a need to stay really, really on top of it and fresh on what trends are in the one eye open, like you're saying. Otherwise, you're going to be left in the dust because it's moving just so fast at the end of the day. So
100%. Yeah.
Let's wrap up with maybe one more question, general question. So again, 2023, July right now, signs of like equity markets improving a little bit. We're not sure if it's real. We're not sure if it's not. We don't know where we're going here in general. What are you most excited about though, moving forward? Is it solving the clean on-ramps and just making it a more friendly back-end centric space? Is it certain kinds of projects that like, what are you personally most excited about in the space?
Good question as well. I think honestly, the thing I'm most excited about is like the metaverse, quote unquote. Like I actually believe we live in the metaverse right now, but I think like what it's going to look like in 10 years time with like Real Vision Pro, like, or whatever headsets we're wearing, where our digital assets are like with us. We have our own, maybe we have digital houses, maybe we have augmented reality around our houses, we have our art in the walls. You're walking down the street and there's like, you interact with just this virtual layer of the real augmented reality. It's like, to me, that is the most exciting part of all of this. I remember in early 2021, I found myself in crypto voxels, which is like one of the earliest virtual worlds built out of NFTs and in crypto. And it was super basic, and it was like very pixelated, and it wasn't that smooth. But just walking around, like listening to music and looking at people who had put their art up, to me, that was the coolest thing I had ever seen in my life. And I was like, oh, people own things in the real digital. Actually, let's take a step back. In 2004 and 3, I was playing RuneScape. I was obsessed with RuneScape for a year. And I remember at some point they mentioned that they were going to introduce like houses where you could have your own house in the game. And like, to me, that was like the most exciting thing. And like, they never brought it out, or like I stopped playing before they did. But that's the same concept. We own these digital assets in the virtual world. To me, that is the most exciting thing. And like onboarding and adoption and PFPs and prices and all of this stuff is like, it's ephemeral and will sort of come and go, and who knows what's going to happen. But like, we are moving into a digital future, and like what that is going to be is crazy, and I can't wait for it.
Oh man, dropping the mega bomb for us at the end of the episode. You're teeing yourself up to have to come on for another whole episode about this at some point. That's so big and juicy and controversial also to some extent, given people's perspectives on is that happening? When is that happening? Right? False starts, all that kind of good stuff. So I'm really happy I asked that question and got your perspective on it. Very, very cool. So Zeneca, overall, just really, really appreciative of the conversation that we had today. Actually, sorry, one question before we hop that I want to grab from the audience that I missed. Questions coming in from BTC Alchemist, which is, given the abysmal NFT market segment, which I guess that's not unfair, what is your strategy for ZenAcademy PFP collection reveal, and how do you think about differentiating your PFP from the other collections in addition to the community access? So we touched briefly on the PFP thing, but I think the question's more about differentiation and like your style of reveal and that side of it.
Yeah. Oh, it's a good question. So I think there's kind of two parts to it. In light of the market, how am I are we approaching the reveal? And I think we were always planning on like sharing the art ahead of reveal, but I think like we're definitely going to do that in probably a more significant way, just because we've seen how people reacted to like it was both the captains and Azuki reveal and many others before, Azabala, a lot of them where expectations were different from reality. And so I think that as we get closer to the reveal, before people actually reveal, and we launch that burn to mint function, we will have shown people real samples of the final output, so they know exactly what they're getting by buying one of these on secondary and burning. So that's one thing we're definitely going to be doing. And how are we going to differentiate? I mean, it's hard to say for sure. I think the art style is quite unique. Like, obviously, there's been a billion PFP projects out there, so there's probably a lot of similarities between them, but there's a couple of things we're doing that make them a little bit different. I mean, stylistically, I think they'll be in the ZenAcademy brand theme and world and universe. So I think that will differentiate. I guess those are the main things. And I think that, like, the thing about PFPs is the more popular they become and the more people use them, the more differentiated they become. Like, you could probably look, and if you look through all the PFPs that have been released, there's so many that look pretty similar to Bored Ape, so many that look pretty similar to Azuki and others. Doodles is probably an exception. There's not, they were like, yeah. But at this point, it's hard to release something that no one has done before, like similar to. But I think we are doing a couple of things that are like going to make it stand out. But I think it does come back to the community element, where because we have such a wonderful and fairly significantly large community, I think that giving them a PFP, and then, you know, if it spreads and grows a bit more, it'll sort of take on an identity and world and life of its own. And again, it does come back down to, you know, we're not doing a paid mint, we're not asking for money, we're not promising the world. We're going to deliver on what we said, and I think it's going to be fun and great. And I have pretty high hopes. You know, you never know what the market is going to do or how the market will react. But I'm going to be I am already proud, but I'm going to be even more proud when we get to launch, and like with the product we're releasing and giving to our community, I'm going to be very happy with it. And then it's not going to stop or change what I'm going to be doing, which is, you know, creating content and building a community around that content. And I think that is the core part of what makes ZenAcademy. They're just the amazing people that are part of the community, and it just keeps growing and growing. So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I feel like differentiation comes from, you know, the brand context, but brand isn't just the outward-facing appearance of the brand. Brand is the product itself. It's the foundation and what it stands for in this case, which is what carries the majority of the power in addition to the outward-facing format. So I totally agree. It's the same reason why, you know, having an MVHQ icon on your profile in the future is going to wind up being gold and really stand for a lot as well. It's very, very parallel reasons, moving in the same pace. So I see no better way to have ended by getting a nice plug on your project, but with reason, because it's just absolutely incredible what you're doing, and we really appreciate everything. So really appreciate this conversation today, Zeneca. Really, really enjoyed it. Live crowd, like always, really appreciate you, and special call out, really appreciate you all getting to episode 50. This has been a big deal, and excellent to have such a great guest as this for this milestone episode as well. So appreciate everyone listening. We'll see everyone similar time next week. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.